They're away. Everybody's away.
Yeah, Lisa's on a retreat, and John and Margaret gone to Kilda Forest.
They're going away today in the caravan. Hi, Rem. I'm roasting. Hello. Nice to see you. Nice to see you. Is it our volume? Our volume's up.
It's actually got that back.
Emma's quiet. Emma's on the quiet. Oh, and if it is, it's this. Say something, somebody. Speak. Susan?
Hear me?
Yeah.
Oh.
I need to figure that out. Right. Scrap that. Microphone. I'll have to figure it out. Can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can.
Cool.
How are you both?
Good.
We're good.
Good.
We're good. Yeah, no complaints. Which is hot, as you can possibly tell. All right, well, we'll make a start. We've got until about 1:30.
I'm listening.
Are you listening? People are captured. So we've got until about 1:30 before apparently Levin's choir comes in next.
Oh, nice.
So it might get a bit noisy. It might get a little bit disjointed. We'll have to wait and see. So yeah, welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome. Full stop. So this is a cult. Just want to get that clear from the beginning. Now you've entered the room, you cannot leave. Right.
Till the choir comes in.
Yeah, they can go up with the angels. No, Mill, thanks for coming, love. This is one of the most special human beings to me on the planet. When I came across this, people know how I came across this, but it was at a time when I didn't have anywhere to live, and it was Mill's mum and grandma that put me up, so I ended up living with Mill for about 4 months, didn't I? And I remember you being like, you were a lot younger. I mean, this is 6 years ago now. And I always remember, like, I'd come in from work and I'd be piss wet through, take off my chainsaw pants, hang them above the fire, and go and get a shower and come down, and I'd have Mill to come home to. And it was like, I don't know, it felt you just family. It was just like family there for me, and it was beautiful. Absolutely loved it. So no, Mill, it's so beautiful to have you here. Thanks, love.
You want me to start?
No, you don't need to.
So we've kind of, we realise sometimes our titles are a bit abstract and it can put people off. So like, what do people in general life talk about? And it's often stress and the feeling of stress. So just trying to appeal to a wider audience and just playing a little bit with what we put out. I think one of the other things that we did a Facebook Live yesterday, it took us an hour to work out how to do it and download all the things we needed. But one of the things that we're wanting to share more about is that the understanding that we share isn't, you can't hold it in your intellect. It isn't a concept. It's not something that you can grasp, but it's something that you know is present within people already. And I think from that come from, you stop looking at people as if there's something wrong with them or as if stress is a problem. And you start recognizing that it's in our misunderstanding that all of those things seem to be a problem. And it's in that misunderstanding that we feel separate and fearful. But this conversation really is about bringing forth an understanding that already exists inside of us, that there isn't any work to do, there isn't any striving, but it's almost like a recognition and a waking up. And that's something that I think continues to happen. It's not that you get to the end of something. It's not that there is somewhere to get to. I feel like you're just getting more and more of a feel for what's already here now. And going from living in a world where we feel affected by outside, affected by people, school, college, work, family, to seeing that our reality, our entire world exists within consciousness. And I think I was saying today, there's a couple of people that used to come along years ago when I first moved up, and they don't come anymore. And they said, oh, you talk about the same thing over and over again. And it's true. It is the same thing over and over again, but it's almost, you can't get enough of hearing it, because the change that it can make in your life, the more that you see it, is phenomenal. Like, to be able to experience more peace regardless of what's going on around us. Like I was saying to Dave, we had a really good conversation a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago now, where I said, what was it? Like, what was it in those early days of waking up to this? What was there? And I said, one of the things for me was, there's nothing to worry about. There's nothing ever to worry about. And I think I'd come from a life up until that point of worrying about everything and everyone, the minute details. And it's so easy to forget that again and get caught up in worrying about what I look like, how many people we've got to come to group, or work, or family, or if that person has said something about me. Like, it's easy to forget again. But when you come back to, there's nothing ever to worry about. There is nothing ever to worry about. And I said it to you, and you just said, wow, yeah, that's what I experienced. And like, since then, I was saying to Dave, it's been funny, we've had quite a few drives up and down the M6, and it's like, you've chilled out again on the roads. I said, I felt like you'd ramped up again, and it's like the traffic was annoying you, and you said, yeah, it's something in that insight that awoke in you again. Like, there's nothing to worry about, there's nothing to stress about, we're all right now. And I think it's so amusing to me that it can feel so simple and so obvious and so true, and then get completely caught out again. And like yesterday, I had a text message from someone, and I got really reactive, and we got in this back and forth in quite long messages, which I don't normally do. And then I was thinking, no, I'm just gonna cut it off. I don't think this friendship is worth it. And then I saw a post online about a friend of ours. We only met at a retreat in California about 2 years ago. So we spent 3 days with him, and then he gave us a lift up the coast, dropped us off, had a beautiful conversation with him. And then about a month ago, he died in a biking accident, and his son had put this post out on Facebook, thanking everyone for the beautiful messages that had gone out to his dad, but also just saying to reach out to those that you love. And I read the post, and I thought, oh my God, what have I been doing all day? My little ego had gone into overdrive, trying to protect something or trying to protect someone else. And I just sent this person a message of I'm really sorry, can we scrap all of that and start from now? And I think that it can be very easy to think we're going to get somewhere where we don't get caught out like that, or we're not going to get overcome with our ego and our personality. But it feels nice that the learning that comes from waking up again. And I feel like you always, like we had this conversation months ago, and you were talking about this gift that you get when you wake up out of a nightmare, a gift that you get when you recognise what you're doing again. And it's like you can keep expanding, keep recognising and seeing that stress is a state of mind. And at some point we're all gonna be up against the feeling of stress. But to know that it isn't something, not a thing separate from us. It's not a thing that's being determined by an outside circumstance. It's just what we're experiencing. It's just experience. And I think I've realised and appreciated more and more the fact we have one another, we have our families, we're all kind of learning about this. Because we've got a few people that have just said to us, is it all right if we have a few more catch-ups? Because they've gone back into life and been like, wow, it seems like overwhelming that this stuff maybe is running away from me again. And I think I'm really grateful to be around this, but also to know that people are all right wherever they're at, whatever's going on for them, however lost they seem to get, that there isn't any need to save people. So I feel more and more that we keep stripping back, like keep building up all these things of what it means to understand the principles and a way of sharing it. But it really is, the knowledge that there's nothing ever to worry about and that we're all okay. Like, and then we build up on top of that our personalities, our ideas, and blah, 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 blah. But it's like those stories can crumble at any point because they're imagination. They're nothing more, nothing less. It's a beautiful gift that we get to experience. But I think one of the things you often say is, in terms of, if you go out your way on a journey, you have to kind of find your way back, and it takes the same amount of time. But with this, it's instant. The moment you wake up, there's no time, there's no needing to get back to. You just, oh yeah, I'm already there. I'm already there. And I think we've kind of been watching some of the online stuff recently, and there's so much discussion and lostness in words. You can't talk about that. You can't say that. You need to be more like this. And like we're all getting lost in the language and the words. It was never in the language, and it was never in the words. Like, after that feeling of waking up, what came was, there's nothing to worry about. I'm not broken. I'm always okay. But that's putting language and form to something. It didn't have a form. It didn't have a content. But I think it's like you touch on something. And I think we've realised a freedom again of what we'd like to share. And it's not confined by any rules or regulations or understandings or anyone else's good ideas. It's more of a show up in the moment and see what comes, and show respect to people who have been incredible teachers to us. But you don't have to teach like them. You don't have to manage your words. Like, the freedom, I think, is in the recognition that each of us can share from what we understand, because we're all touching on that same place, and it will come out in different words. And like, we were listening to Alan Watts today, and I just thought, wow, when you listen, he's pointing to the same thing. Listen to the Lost Chapters of Thomas, this beautiful talk by a guy called Ted Nottingham. And I'm like, he's saying the same thing. But if you get caught in the content and you try and figure out the words, and you'll find exception and you'll get lost. But the message is the same. Like, we get caught up in our character of who we think we are. But that's not who we are. Recognise that, then you get to experience more of who you really are. And then you'll get caught up in that dance again. So I think I've talked long enough to let you settle now, so it's your turn.
Thanks for that.
Well, normally you look at me and you're like, do you want to say anything? I'm like, I don't want to say anything. You start.
Yeah, I don't know. It's this thing, it's like, Mill knew me just before coming across this. And I remember one time I was led in bed and I was crying my eyes out, and next thing I know, Millie had gone out and spent her pocket money on a bunch of flowers for me. I remember it was just one of those moments where, I don't know, I cried even more then. It was like, oh no, I've really got something to cry about. It wasn't long after that a miracle started to kind of, I don't know, I can't explain it. But life started to move in a direction that I realised we have no control over. And one of the miracles was sin. And that's how I got introduced to what people call the three principles, what some people call innate health, what some people call, it doesn't matter what it's called, these are just words. But there's a message in the words. And this is the message that we try and get across. And because this message, for an individual, for a person born of this planet, walking around, living life, for an individual to start to gain clarity into the nature of what life truly is, it's priceless. It's truly, 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 truly priceless. I always remember Sue asking me this question. She said, what value would you put on your mental sanity, Dave? And I was like, I don't know. I'd give everything for it. It's like, you cannot put a value on it. It's valueless. Invaluable, is that the word? You know what I mean?
Yes, it would.
So it's like I've been around this 6 years now, and it's weird because every time I sit down to have a conversation with somebody about this, I always find myself going, what the fuck am I talking about here?
I think that as well.
What am I actually talking about? It's like, what am I actually talking about? Because it's not something of an intellectual thing. It's like, this is something far beyond anything that the intellect can grasp. Yet we try and figure it all out with the intellect. And then we end up putting words to it. We say, oh, it's this. No, it's not that. It's non-duality. No, it's not that. It's the paradigm. No, it's not that. It's religion. No, it's not that. It's meditation. No, it's not that. It's yoga. No, it's not that. It's this. And it's like, you just see everybody's lost in this kind of world of, they think they know something about life. And this is all ego. This is all ego. But this is where we find ourselves. So I remember when I got introduced to this by Sue, it was like, I remember I was seeing psychologists, psychiatrists, and I remember the first time you spoke to me, I burst into tears, and you just said, why the hell are you crying, Dave? I said, because I know what you're talking is sense. I know what you're talking about is true. I said, I think you're talking about something some people would call God, but I just call it nature. That's what I said at the time. Got this sense. Sue's talking about something so much bigger than my problems. Not a bigger problem. She wasn't going, you think you've got problems, Dave? Listen to this. No, she was talking about something deep, fundamental, but somehow quite obvious in its own weird kind of way. It was quite obvious and simple. 9 weeks later, I thought I knew something about what she was talking about. I got demoralized. I was fed up with it all. And I listened to Sid. He told me you were going to kick my ass if I didn't listen to Sid. And I listened to Sydney Banks, and I went for this walk. And I just, this is why I say, I don't know what I'm talking about. Because whatever happened then is beyond anything you can put words to. But I realized it was real. And in the realization that what was there was real in that moment, brought the realization of something very profound about reality and life and who we think we are. My life changed in a moment. When I came back into human ego reality, I'd learned some really valuable lessons. And that was when in that moment I realized this is really, really simple. So to kind of put form to the formless, it was a realization of what life is. And on our title tonight, we've got, is life stressful? Is life stressful as the title. Stress was always one where you get loads of people, obviously tonight. It's just, everybody must be zen down, mustn't it? Well, we have to break that title down. It's only 3 words. So we won't bother with is. Because I haven't got a fucking clue what is actually means. And I can't even bother to think about it. I know it's just a word I use in a sentence. What is something? Life. Let's start with that. What is it? Because if we're going to look at the title of the talk, then we need to break it down. Let's look at it. Let's look at the aspects. Does anybody know what the word is means? Can anybody describe the word is? It's just not occurring to me. Can anybody?
I play a game with kids where I sort of say, like, first sentence to the other, they can interrupt them at any point and get to talk about one word.
Okay.
And then they've got to talk about that until we interrupt again and say, tell me about that, tell me about that.
Okay.
Something like, is life stressful? Tell me about is. Is there a word that, blah, 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 tell me about that, blah, blah, blah. And it's either Haiti or love it, as you can imagine. So that just made me think of that when you said what's this. I have said to people, what's this?
We need that guy's words in it.
We do. We need a
Sid
word.
Bankshaw, in the early days, he called everything business.
Business.
Yeah, which was everything.
Well, what he described as isness was everything that is experienced.
Yeah.
So the world, the universe, everything within experience, what is taken form. So from material things through to the concepts and ideas within our mind, he called that isness. But he said there's something from which isness comes from. And he described that as allness. So it's starting to gain clarity into what life is. Because once you start to figure out what life is, this is no shallow conversation. This is a phenomenally deep conversation, and it astounds me that we don't have people coming from all over the place to start to hear about what is life. What is it?
We never asked the question.
Not many people do so. No, not many people do ask the question. They live in it.
Yeah.
And we'll question all kinds of things, you know what I mean? We'll question politicians, we'll question whether something's fake news or not, we'll question all kinds of things. Is the earth warming up? Is the earth flat? You know, we'll question all kinds of things, but people don't question what is life. What is this thing that is taking place, that we get to experience? What is it? What is this thing where everything exists in it? What's that stuff? What is life? There's a beautiful thing when you look at what life is. You realize that there's something that applies to every single living thing. All things. You'll see an enlivenment. You'll see like this awareness. This kind of active awareness. And this applies to every single living thing, no matter what it is, whether it's a bacteria or whether it's a blue whale. It exhibits this aliveness. This is what everything is. Everything is this aliveness. This, what's the word I'm looking for? God knows, it's like an animation. It's like an animation, and that's what life is. It's like this animation that is happening, coursing through these things we call our bodies. It's coursing through it, and it's creating this impression that we are here right now as this separate entity. We call it a self. Who are you? Me. 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 Everybody calls themselves me. Everybody calls themselves I. It's funny, we all call ourselves by the same name. But we get lost in this. We get lost and we start to forget what life truly is. And so in the getting lost, we start to assume, well, it must be something else. So we go in search of what is this life stuff? Well, how do you do life? How do you do life well? Well, we need to make money. We need to do this. We need to be successful. We need to be noticed. We need to be popular. We need all this stuff. And then we go in search of this stuff, thinking that somehow this life stuff is given to us by an external source. And that is where our life becomes richer, in an external thing. But on that day of realizing what I personally got to realize, it was like, that's not true. There is no reality outside of our own minds. outside of consciousness. There is no reality outside of consciousness. And this was this was like the most mind-blowing realization. There is nothing outside of consciousness. Everything is within it. Every single object, every single weather phenomena, every single morning, every single afternoon, every single essay, every single partner, every single penny, every single grey hair. It's all existing within consciousness. And the way that this consciousness gets to experience itself is by creating things. This is a thing that human beings forget. We think we're so friggin' amazing, yet we never created us. Yet here we are, sat here discussing the nature of what life is. And so we've gone from this world at this point within my own life of thinking that there, not even questioning, but knowing deep down that there's something I'm frigging well missing about life. I know there's something I'm missing, and I know it's obvious. I just can't put my bloody finger on it. I think we've all had that sense of, I know there's more to life, but I can't find it. And so this is why people do go on these massive searches. And they go searching for it in drugs, and they go searching for it in this and that, and trying out things, bungee jumping, whatever. And they find this, they just have to keep looking and keep looking. Until one day they wake up and they realize that what they're looking for is what they actually are. But it's not what they think they are. What they're looking for is a magic. What they're looking for is something to be in awe of, something that enlivens life beyond the everyday norm. That's why people do skydiving and drugs and all kinds of things. They want to experience. Metal detecting. Can't beat it. But to realize that everything we've ever needed lies as our platform. So it's like suddenly waking up and recognizing a very, very, very fundamental fact about life, that there is no reality outside of consciousness. Nobody in this room or online can hear this conversation outside of consciousness. This is totally taking place within consciousness. But for all intents and purposes, it looks like the world that we see exists outside of our own minds. It looks like things affect us external to our own minds, separate to our own minds. And in that, the world becomes an incredibly scary place. Because it's a very dynamic place, is the world, full of people that perhaps we don't like or we don't agree with. It's a world full of a future. It's a world full of a past. It's a world full of places that create feelings and people that create feelings within us, a situation that create feelings with us. In misunderstanding, life is a fucking scary place to be. And this is the beautiful thing about this, is like when you start to wake up to this, you get to go and play in them. And this is the one thing that this is like, to me, the fundamental message is to realize this is true, then go and play, go and live. Just go and live. Like Jen said, when you woke up, she said, I realized there's nothing to be afraid of. In that moment of awakening was like, I call it an awakening. I do call it an awakening. I think I can't really think of another word to describe it. But in that moment of realization, it was like insight, whatever anybody wants to call it, that I can't explain. It was like everything is perfect. The whole universe is total perfection, with all the things that we think are wrong going on it, all the things like the ice caps melting and mass extinction. No, this is absolute perfection. Outside of my ego, my judgment of this going on, this is just what's taken form. And I remember the freedom that I came out with. And I remember you and I used to have some of the most beautiful conversations after that. But the freedom that exists beyond, when we start to see that everything we think, oh, good idea, love. I think he's a bit thirsty. When we start to get this sense, when we start to wake up and realize that the fundamental nature of life is, it's all a play of consciousness.
Sorry.
How many sugars do you put in? It's all a play of consciousness. And it's consciousness that is rusty. And it's consciousness that is the trees. And it's consciousness that is the fungus. It's consciousness that is the birds migrating, just sitting ready to migrate. This consciousness is so frigging great. It's everything. And it gets lost and it thinks it's something else. And it thinks it's a victim, and it thinks it's great, and it thinks it's doing life well, and then it thinks it's doing life shit, and then it thinks it's popular, then it thinks it's fucking unpopular, and it thinks it's all this kind of nonsense. And this is all nonsense created within the minds of people. So it's like we go on this search to try and find what it is we're actually looking for, but then we go in the search within everything that we create within our mind. Thought. All these thoughts and ideas and concepts. And then we realize sooner or later that, hold on, that stuff changes all the time. That stuff changes all the time. My reality changes all the time. So sometimes I'm anxious. And I call myself anxious. If you'd spoken to me 6 years ago, who are you? Oh, I'm Dave Elleray, I'm anxious, I'm this, I'm that, angry man, and depressive, and tree surgeon, I'm a brother, I'm a family protector, friend protector, and I'm not very good at maths, and I give you this bullshit that I just thought that's what I am. Unintelligent. That was one of the things I used to consider myself, unintelligent. And then it was waking up and saying, no, intelligence is the nature of consciousness. It's so fucking intelligent, it created everything. Everything that is experienced, it's created. But that's what we all are. We are all the deepest of intelligence. Infinitely deep intelligence, getting lost in the idea that we're something else. Getting lost in this story that is being created within our minds, things we've been told, things we've identified with, and we've created this story, and that's what our reality, that is ultimately what each and every single one of our ego is. It's a story. It's a story. And the moment we see past the story, we find we're free. Fuck, life isn't what I thought it was. Life's a magical display of consciousness. And it always has been. I knew that when I was a child because I used to play with it. I'd create all kinds of different realities. And this is why everybody's different. Because everybody sees a different everybody sees a different world. Everybody sees a different reality. And yet I think my reality is fucking real. I think my reality is real. I think my reality is true. I think the way I see myself has to be true. Because that's who I am. But it's funny because you don't see me like that. You think I'm an arsehole. I don't think I'm an arsehole. It's like we start to see that there's discrepancies in reality. We start to see that there's discrepancies in the way that we think that the world works and the way that we think we work. Sometimes we dream up a scenario about the future, a future event, and we think, oh, fucking hell, this is going to be terrible. And we get there and it's absolutely fine. But we will live in that moment of thinking it's terrible with the idea that somehow that situation that doesn't even exist yet is somehow creating this experience, and we'll never question it. We'll never question the fact that how can something that doesn't even exist be creating the experience of life now? What the hell is going on? We don't question it. We just blindly buy into it and just assume, well, it's reality, it's what I'm experiencing, it must be true. Until somebody comes along and goes, guess what? Do you know why you're struggling in life? Because you're lost. You're lost in something called ego, self. You think you're something other than what you truly are. You think everything else is something else. We fear shit. What are we truly fearing if it's not thought?
I like the way it was described on the audio I was listening to today. It said, we're afraid of ghosts. And unless we face them, they still seem to exist. And I think in the metaphor, it was saying that the ghost is our fear of public speaking. Our ghost is our fear of getting life wrong. Our ghost is anything that we separate from and think is an identity or a thing on its own. And I realised like that was one of the things. Initially, after coming across this, I stopped being afraid of my ghosts. My ghost of being around lots of people, my shyness, my insecurities, my jealousies in relationships, all of that vanished because I stopped being afraid of these imaginings. And it was described today as ghosts, and I thought it's such a good, because when you turn and face things, it said it's almost like you see right through it. You see it for what it is. It has no substance. But I've realised that there's been quite a few things really since, over the last 4 years since we've been together, there's been so many things that didn't look like ghosts. They looked like they had some form, and I've shied away from them, and I've feared them. And in that fear, it creates the unsettledness. And it seems that if we shy away from what we fear, if we shy away from ghosts, in some way we're going to be safe. You don't realise you still live in that fear. And it's like, I can see that when you face something head on, when you recognise that it has no substance, the fear vanishes. But we think by avoiding things that we're afraid of, we think our feeling of afraid or our feeling of insecurity or our feeling of jealousy or our feeling of something is information about that something, rather than information of like your feeling. And I feel sometimes the intensity of feeling, it's like it's a moment to wake up. When I'm sat at the front thinking, I know Dave's going to look at me in a minute and say, you got anything to say? And I've got nothing to say. I used to shy away from that. Oh, no, I haven't got anything. And I've done it my whole life. Like, if an uncomfortable feeling means shy away, I don't do it. Where it's almost like, no, it's an invitation to wake up again. There's nothing to worry about. There's nothing to fear. And I feel like we get so afraid of our own feelings, and we think they're information about a world. We forget. No, it's information about what is going through your mind. It's information that you feel separate. It's information that you think there is duality. Like, it's a very helpful feedback system that we've got completely wrong, because we've come to fear our feelings, and we've come to try and avoid certain feelings. We've placed our feelings on outside, on people, on events. And as soon as we do that, we create an other, and we create fear, and we create separation. And I've seen it in so many areas of my life, but there's some stuff that's been happening over the last few weeks in me. I've realised, God, I've been shying away from this certain aspect of life because I'm terrified. I don't feel like I can deal with it. I feel like I need to see something else about the principles around it. And I've almost been I remember my mum gave me a book when I was a teenager, which I didn't read. I read the title, I read the back page, which was called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. I was like, yeah, whatever. But I kind of get where that book was coming from, because I think we think fear means something about what we should and shouldn't do. And to recognise that built into us is common sense. Like, fear can be helpful if it's jumping out of the way of a car or it's running away from a tiger. But so much of our fear is based in absolute illusion. It's based on this idea that we can be affected by other, that we can be affected outside of consciousness. And I think it seems so many of the things that I felt was wrong with me before I came across this seem to vanish when I learn about this. I'm like, wow, it's like, I'm not that. I'm not a shy person. I'm not an insecure person. They are all creations. But then I've had kind of my jealousies and my insecurities, and I've been like, yeah, maybe I'm a bit, maybe there's something in that. Maybe I need to do some work on that. Maybe it's because my dad can be like that. Like, constantly creating more story around something that's imagined in the first place. And you see you're putting thought upon thought upon thought. And it feels like at some point, someone pulls out the bottom card and everything comes tumbling down. And you're like, there never was a something. There never was a reason. There never was a somewhere to get to. We feel like we feel because of consciousness, thought now. And whatever our creation is, it's not true. It's not it. It's a potential. And it feels like you get to become more and more fearless. I don't think we become stupid. I think we recognise that there are, limits as a physical being on this planet. I don't know. There could be people that can fly. I've got no idea. It's like we don't become reckless. I feel like we get more and more intelligent, more and more filled with knowledge. And Sid often used to say, you need to pour out old stale wine if you want to pour in new, if you want new to come in. But I hadn't realised how much of the stale wine I'm kind of holding on to, because I think it is a something. And another thing it said in the talk today is you have to empty yourself of yourself if you want to be filled with new, with spirit, with God, with nature, with mind. And I just see that we don't mean to, but we hold on to so much unnecessary belief. But to also see that throughout our life, throughout the day, we let it go. Just quite naturally. It's just not existing for us. That's how natural and everyday this is. Because the things that frighten us, the things that terrify us, when they occupy our mind, it is our everything, because it's all that there is. But throughout the day, our mind lets go. There's this kindness to our mind. But then because we think it's real, we bring it back to mind and we try and deal with it. But the thing is, it isn't. And throughout the day, our mind will clear and we get filled again with something else. And I think it's so obvious, it's so in our face that we miss it. And you were metal detecting today, and I was sat in the car knitting socks. And I'm like, that is how cool we've become. Listening to this talk, and I just thought, I've listened to it so many times and I've not heard that bit. My God, like, how did I not hear that bit? And you see that when you hear, you're hearing the message. You're going beyond the words to what that message is, because it wakes something up in you. And I feel like it was just describing this complete shift that can happen when we go from looking out to looking in. And it's the metaphor that's always used, but it isn't within what we know. It's within truth. It's within before. And I know that looking at the videos on that first course I was on and seeing prison inmates and people in homeless shelters finding pure freedom, even though that they were in some of the worst situations, and some of them had awful things happen in their lives and some of them had done awful things. But for them to find mental health, to find spiritual nature, to find peace, whatever we want to call it, suggested to me that that was possible for anybody. And I think when you see that the reason it's possible for anyone is because it is what everyone is made of. And I think I've been doing some calls with a teenager, and she doesn't really speak. So I have like an hour Zoom call and she doesn't really speak to me. I'm like, does this make sense? Yeah. And they're like, yes, no answers most of the time. And I thought, well, all I can bring to this is I can look at you and I can know that you're perfect and you're totally whole. And there's nothing wrong with you. And I'm going to share and point and give metaphors and stories. And I hope that over the time we spend together, we've got 5 calls, that we'll get to know each other and she will open up more. But I feel like if I can, for that one child, be that one person that looks at her as if there's nothing wrong with her, that she's perfect and she's whole, I feel like that could be enough. And I think that's what shifted for me, to have someone look at me as if I was a whole, perfect human being that sometimes got shy and insecure and went to eating disorders to change how they felt. But they didn't see that as broken or wrong. It was like, you know, I'm not talking to any of that stuff. I'm talking to you. I'm talking to you. And I feel like whenever I look back at my videos, I feel like I'm always saying this, but it's like there is so much content and noise that comes when you're trying to be a teacher, or you're trying to get a point across, or you're trying to find the beginning for a group. If there's new people, or if there's people who've been around, where's the beginning? Where do I start? What do I define? How do I describe it? What story will I tell to, like, with all of that busyness on your mind, you're not just here in the room, like with who's here in this moment, recognizing that there isn't a teaching, that there isn't even an understanding, that there is just what's already happening. And you see that people's minds naturally go in and out of different experience. All the things that we're afraid of at some point vanish, and we're just in the moment doing something we enjoy, or watching a film, and you see that it's the most natural, everyday, ordinary thing. But we then see that in itself is magical. Like the fact that we're here, and I always use the example of watching my friend's baby when he was about 18 months old, I think. And him just sat out in the garden with us, and then a bird flying past, and him just stopping, like dropping whatever he was doing, and just like, I said to Dave, God, isn't it amazing how amazed he is at the bird? And you went, yeah, because he hasn't got a concept for bird. Well, that's a bird. We filter it out. Like, he's amazed that this thing's flying above his head. I don't even know if he knows flying. I don't even know if he knows the word bird. But like, he was in the experience of what that was. And I think more and more we can get to experience that same magic. And we will still play, and we'll still create, and we'll still imagine, and we'll still have ghosts. But like,
that's part of the play.
But it's not a problem. It's not a problem. And so I was listening on one of Dave's one-to-one calls the other day, and what is the difference between this lady sat in front of us on the screen and me? And I just thought, I don't think I'm afraid of all those experiences, and I don't think there's something wrong with me if I have that experience, and I don't think that there's a bad, wrong experience. And I think she was looking to not have the bad, wrong experience. She was looking to not feel awful feelings or to feel lost. And I was thinking, wow, that is where we get it wrong. We're trying to avoid the inevitable. We're going to get lost. But the only difference with understanding, I feel, is like you fear it less. Like, you don't think you're doing life wrong if you're in a bad mood.
Well, you realise you can't get life wrong.
Because I was really emotional on Saturday, and I don't really do that very often. I was like, I'm just being like my sister. But I wasn't trying to figure it out. I was just like, I feel really emotional. I'd actually had a disagreement with my niece before we drove up. I knew that had been on my mind a bit, and it didn't feel like it had to mean something. And then we went and met some friends and camped. Had the best night. Before, it would have been like, oh God, I'm in this awful feeling. I can't socialise. I can't be around people. Like, it's all so self-focused and narrow and small. When you don't take it as seriously, when you recognise that it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything about you. It doesn't mean anything about the world. It just means you're in a temporary experience. Then you get to live. And you get to see how kind our mind is, that it lets things go. You can be in another moment. It's available any moment, but it's not wrong. And I learned so much from that. And I've got a friend I want to have a conversation to, because I'm like, wow, when she has days like that, it's like, it's the moon. It's because of, it's a past thing. It's like, there's so much content around it, rather than being, wow, you're just really emotional today, who knows? then it just takes the content out of life in that way.
This is it. We're always trying to figure out reality. But whenever we try and figure out why we feel like we feel, or why life looks to us as it does, we always look for a circumstance. Continuously looking for a circumstance, whether it's school, whether it's kids at school, whether it's people, whether it's work, whether it's a new job, whether it's moving home, whether it's whatever. Traffic. We're always trying to pin experience. We're always trying to create a reality outside of ourselves. We're always trying, we're unwittingly creating this illusion of an external source of experience. But experience is life. And life is us. It's taking place within. It's not an external thing. You cannot experience life there, over there. You can look over there. You can see over there. You can see over there. But you see it within. It's like there is no outside of this. And this is such a beautiful thing to start to recognize. There's no outside. There's no outside of consciousness. There's no outside of your mind. There's no outside of the power of thought. It's like it literally, we are this creative force. When I talk about, in the lost chapters of Thomas, they talk about Jesus was asked, or Yeshua as he was called then, where is God's kingdom? And if you ask the majority of people nowadays, you go, oh, where's this God's kingdom at? They would go, it doesn't exist. Or they would go, oh, it's up in the sky. Or they would go, oh, it's where you go after death. And it's like we've created all these, again, external realities, external circumstance. But Yeshua, as he was called back then, the response was, well, the kingdom of heaven resides within the heart of every man, woman, and child. Very specific inside. Inside you, inside everything, inside everybody is God's, this was Yeshua's way of putting it, is God's kingdom. What is God in the Bible? Well, it's the creator. Right? So whether we like the word God or not, it doesn't matter. It's just a noise, but it's like there is this creative force that exists in the heart of life, and it is creating continuously. It's creating reality within our very being. And it's creating a reality that looks so frigging real, we don't question it. We just assume that it's a fact. And it's mundane, life's difficult, life's stressful, life's this, life's that. No, it's not. No, life's a force. We experience stress. We experience something we call stress, something we label stress. We experience something we label as love. We experience something that we label as excitement, as gratitude. These are all experiences within life. We experience things like depression, something we label depression. These are all just feeling states that we then attribute a word to. And then the moment we attribute a word to it, they're no longer just like a spectrum of experience, or they become a something. They become a real thing now. It's got a fucking word. It's called depression. I've got depression. I've got depression. I've got a cup of tea. I've got a watch on. I've got a ring I found with my metal detector. I've got depression. I've got anxiety. You notice, I'm not saying I am a cup. I've got a cup. I'm not saying I am a watch. I've got a watch. I'm not saying I am a ring. I've got a ring. I'm not saying I am depression. In our language, we know this to be true. We know that we are not the experience that we are dreaming of. We know that because our language says it. I often ask people, I say to them, whose laptop are you talking to me on? They'll go, mine. Okay, yours, okay. Okay, whose house are you sat in? Well, mine. Right, whose car do you drive? Mine. We were talking about ego. Whose ego are we talking about? Mine. Oh, right, okay. So you use the same word to describe a house as you do your car and your computer, which suggests that you are not that. That's not what you are. In the same way as you use the same word, mind, to describe ego, my ego. Oh, so I'm not all the things I think. Then what am I? And then we'll go into thinking about, well, what am I then? Is that, oh, what a beauty. Massive spider going on the ratch. Oh.
Just a complete change subject, sorry.
And then we go in search.
I don't want to climb on with
Do you want me to move it?
It's a daddy, isn't it?
Do you want me to move it?
I'm all right. I'm just
You all right?
concentrate.
I'll move it if you want. It can't hurt you. Just a little.
He knows I'm thinking about it. Just stop.
A little bit. You all right? He's cooking. We'll have a break in a second. But we do, then we try and figure out who are we then, don't we? So we've kind of established, we've kind of realized that, no, we're not this. This is not what we are. Well, I've got anxiety, I've got depression, I've got this, I've got that. But who's this I that's got it? Who's that bit? Because if that is something that is separate or different to the experience, the actual experience, then what's that bit? Because surely if we can find out what that bit is, and then, like I say, we go and try and find it. Right, okay, well, let's have a think about this. And then we start creating more and more identity. More and more. We start going into my intellect. But deep down, we know that we are not what we think we are. Deep down, we know that. And the more we recognize that fact, the less we identify with the reality or the experience or the feelings or the thoughts that are occurring within consciousness. The less we identify with what is going on for us, and we start to recognize something obvious about these kind of things, they come and they go. They come and they go, they come and they go, they come and they go. I didn't, when I said I'm a depressive, it's like I never took into account all the times when the depression wasn't there. I just assumed that's what I was. When I was laughing at a film, or when I was coming home and I'd been for a shower and come down and Mill sat on the sofa and we cuddle up and watch something on telly. So I didn't have depression then. I was perfectly content. I was happy as anything. I felt totally in love. But if you'd asked me, I'm a depressive. That's what I am. And then you get to wake up and go, but when I'm not depressed, am I that? Or if I'm not depressed, then I'm angry. But if I'm not being angry and I'm all right, am I that? And you start to look at all these things and you realize you're none of it. This is not what anybody is. What that is a play of consciousness. What that is a display of reality that's going on within our mind. But we keep on thinking it's something real. We keep on thinking it's something else. So to start to make sense of what life is, we have to look at the fundamentals of it. Because it is a fundamental. We call it our life. We call it our life. Or what is our life? Well, our life is something that we're born into. In this incarnate state, this physical state. And it's something that it terminates, comes to an end. That's what we call our life. But then we confuse it for all the goings on within our life, all the realities and dreams that we dream up within. And this is why, like in Eastern philosophy and mysticism, they call it a dream of life. Because everybody's dreaming a different reality, which is why people argue, which is why people vote for different political parties, which is why nobody's come dressed in the same clothes or done their hair the same. It's why nobody's got on the same jewellery. It's why nobody's got the same memories of the same event. We were talking to somebody the other day, a policewoman, weren't we? And she said, that's really interesting what you say. She said, because I once went to this filling station robbery. And she said, I had 4 witnesses stood there watching this one event.
It's slightly different angles.
Yeah, slightly different angles, she said. And so in walked this bald man who was like this, that and the other. Then I asked the next person. In walked a man with a motorcycle helmet on. And then was it a ginger man? He was like,
You might have made that bit up.
I know he's definitely a tall man and what's that?
It's for your joke.
What joke?
I don't think it was a ginger man. It was someone with a bald head, someone with a helmet, and then something completely different.
Something completely different. Probably. But she said, that's so interesting. She said, because these are people who were claiming that what they saw was true. Their reality looked so real to them.
She said it was weird because she'd seen the CCTV
right.
footage. So she knew that they weren't lying, they had all been there, but she knew what really had happened. And she said she was just listening to these 4 people going, none of you saw what actually happened. Like, I've seen the video too.
We made a film of that. It's like a crime scene, and it's like, it happens in the square. And then they take all these witnesses have seen it, and then when they interview, like, everything's completely different because everyone has a different perspective on it. So it wasn't even the same crime, but people didn't even see what had happened. Weird. It's like there's like everyone that's met you, there's loads of different versions of you walking around because everyone that sees has their own version of it.
That's right.
Thousands of different people.
Thousands and thousands of different realities all going on. Millions.
I'm going to give it away by telling you about it. You can show it to somebody else. There's a video online of the University, and it's two teams playing basketball in a hall. It's a really plain colour background with people with white t-shirts and black t-shirts. We've got a white ball. And it says,
I've seen it.
You've seen it, yeah. And it's like, watch it and count how many times the ball's passed. You've seen it? Yeah. No. Okay. So pass the ball 1, 2, 3. You get to the end and you say, so how many times has it go? 15. Okay. Did you see the gorilla? And play it back again. I want to swear. There's a huge big gorilla that just sort of wanders into the screen large as life going, yay everyone, yay, and now just walk out. And people just don't see it. You just literally, how much else is going on in life? Not just that we see differently, don't see. Because we don't expect to see it. I mean, that is a really graphic version of that, isn't it? I mean,
I think it's to help people with the fact that we miss, like motorbikes. We don't have motorbikes on our minds, so we don't see them.
Yeah.
And people would think, oh no, of course I'd see a motorbike if it was there. So then they had that as a campaign to try and raise it. If you're not looking for it, you're often not going to see it. So if you're just looking for other cars on the road, then you're not going to see bike. I remember on our speed awareness course, someone said, how many cyclists have you seen? I'm thinking, none. Said, on your way home, count how many people you see on push bikes. I was like, that's 6. And you realise if you're not thinking it, it doesn't exist for you, you don't see it. And it is like, what else can we miss? If it's that obvious, I think the one I saw was a moonwalking bear. And it's like, how did I miss that moonwalking bear? Like, it's so obvious once you've seen it.
Yeah.
But if it's not in your consciousness, you don't see it. So you start to see through your own consciousness. And like when you start to get a sense of that and you recognise that consciousness isn't something fixed, it's something completely fluid, it's a potential. What else can you see? Like from you to go from a world of depression full of awful people and people with cancer on the earth in one moment to the world is beautiful and perfect and whole in another moment and nothing outside can change. You see, well, if the whole world can change with a new perspective, then what else can change?
Then what is this world?
Well, sometimes, like, say, for instance, someone said, oh, start looking for red cars, you don't look at that. All of a sudden, all you see is red cars. And then that's all you see. You see them more and more and more. It's like that law of attraction thing. It's not, it's just because it's in consciousness. So once you're thinking happy thoughts, then you're going to see the sky looks nicer, the people look nicer, because you're thinking that, aren't you? You raise your level of consciousness, you're seeing things differently. It's like when you said about heaven, or the kingdom of heaven, or that's here now. We just don't know it.
That's
We're
right.
living it now, but we just, it's our thoughts that are stopping it.
That's another thing that he said. It's like, he was asked twice in this last chapter, Thomas, where is this kingdom of heaven? And he said, the kingdom of heaven is all over the face of planet Earth, but mankind does not see it. What it sees is it sees the dream of reality that it's walking around in. It sees a story. It doesn't see the creative force that is behind everything, because it can't. It can't be seen with an intellect. Simply because, if you want to call it God, if you want to call it mind, if you want to call it consciousness, whatever you want to call it, it's like, it doesn't matter. They're just noises, names. It's like, but there is the creative force, and this creative force can't be seen by trying to study it via creation, what we think. Because all that does is creates concepts and concepts and concepts, and that's what reality is. It's all concepts. It's all concepts. Every these conversations are completely not a concept. Non-duality is a concept. And it's like religion's a concept. Three principles is a concept. It's not it. Because these are just conversations. So we just have to start to get an appreciation for that. And it's like, I was speaking with a lady the other day, and she said, on a one-to-one, and she said, so what do I need to do? I said, no, you don't need to do anything. I said, honestly, please. She said, I obviously have to do something, don't I? To get it. I'm like, no, please, I'm just asking you, I just want you just to listen.
It's always like the fact, isn't it? It's interesting how it falls away. That's the bit you can't describe, something that seems to make no sense.
No, you can't. It makes no sense to people. Because we're so used to doing something. And this lady sent me a text, and was it yesterday? And she said, first thing in the morning, she said, it's 5:30, I've just woken up. She said, I've been in such a headstorm. She said, with all these thoughts running through my head. And she said, I was trying to get rid of it. And she said, then I remembered what you said, there's nothing to do. And she said, and somehow, she said, I can't explain it. She said, but she said, I could only say surrendered. And she said, in that, she said, I fell into this space. She said, I saw all these thoughts and all these emotions running through me. She said, but I realized, she said there was a separation. She said, it only lasted a couple of seconds. And she said, but I saw these thoughts for what they were. And she said, and then I came back in, and she said, what did she say? She said, I can't remember what she said after that. But it was like, from time to time, we get to glimpse it. We start to get glimpses of the nature of life, and you can never fully know it. You can't know it full stop, because to know it's an intellectual thing. You can't know it.
Remember someone
And
described
I think when you realize you can't know it, it's like it takes something off your mind to try and get to know something, because you can't know it. Because the moment you think you know it,
It just takes the pressure.
Yeah.
Because he's not always worrying about what's going to happen, because you don't know anything. So if you just go through life thinking, well, I don't know, it just takes that pressure.
Sorry, Jen, can you speak up a little bit just to
Sorry,
take
yeah,
online?
sure. Sort of like grabs hold of you and runs, go like, where are you going? And that's good. I don't know. Yes, you do know. Come on, tell me. You've got to tell me. Otherwise you're going to get locked up. And you say, look, I don't know. I have no idea. And he's going, look, if you can't answer me, I'm going to take you away. And he's going, look, I honestly don't know. So he gets dragged off to prison. Says, see, I didn't know.
yeah, I like that.
But that was massive for me when it was when I just realised that I don't know anything. It was like a massive what's to stress about? Because all you're doing is you think about, oh, this is going to happen, that's going to happen. And then when you realise, well, you don't know anything, what's to stress about? It's not true. What's the point? What's the point? Because, like you say, you went to prison, you didn't know anything. But like you said before, when you first started, you said, people said, oh, it's because you keep saying the same thing. But you might be saying the same thing, but every time you're saying the same thing, I hear something different every time. So what's changing? It must be me that's saying something. We all say the same thing. So, I hear something new every time I come.
Exactly.
It's like me listening to that talk. I realised I've listened to that 50 times.
Yeah.
I keep hearing different things. I keep thinking, where the hell was I last time when I've not heard that before? I've got no memory of it. But what I was going to say a moment ago is that I remember someone saying to me once about this understanding, was like, you cannot see your own absence. I was like, what? It hurt my head for a moment, but it's like, you cannot see your own absence. And you recognise that if you're waking up to what mystics call oneness, just consciousness, it will always take two to see other. And really what we're wanting to realise is there isn't self and other, there isn't duality, there is just one. And I remember me just sitting there and I can't understand it. It was just that phrase kept going around in my head, you cannot see your own absence. You cannot see your own absence. And I was like, I've been trying to see my own absence. And then the other thing he said is, once it's seen, there's no one there to see it. And it's like that takes it off your mind to try and know something. And I think a bit like you were saying, the falling away, we don't notice the absence of things often. We're just not there anymore. I've just realised the time. Should we break? Toilet and tea break. So we'll just have 10 minutes. So well, just over to come back at past.
20 past.
20 past. 25 past. Otherwise, it's only 4 minutes.
25 past. That's what I meant. 25.
25 past.
Hey, you too. Do you get a brew? Oh, I thought we had the same cup. Not quite. Okay.
I just wondered if there's any questions, if there's anything that's come up, or if there's things that have happened for people. Like, so we haven't seen anyone since July, really. So it's if anything's come up or that you want to share. Matt.
Me?
Yeah.
Well, just I could share something when you look about everything just happens in consciousness. Kind of made me realise that.
Just one sec.
Yeah,
sorry.
I'll tell you a little bit about I had like a shamanic journey, like last week. So it's obviously it's from Native Americans, and they use like drums to put you in like trance, right? And then kind of journey into what they call like the underworld, so into the animal world. It's interesting because it's like, it's very imaginative. You go into this imaginary world with all these creatures. And then you're supposed to pick like a power animal. They say this animal comes to you with your imagination. And it's kind of like a guide or a spirit guide. And so I'm really open. I'm just like, I don't know what happened here. And so I went down into this little tunnel, I was just imagining things. And it's hard to know where you're imagining this, or if it's coming through you, you know what I mean? So and I had a feeling it'd be like a cat. And then like this cat walked to me. And I just walked away and it followed me. I was like, yeah, I know what it is. The links. It was quite interesting. Anyway, so the guy was like, I did this journey with you, putting up this information on it. It was really, really interesting. He had some really insightful things, like links kind of solitary, kind of stays by itself. It's really aware, it's really in touch, to see what's going on. It's got wisdom. Yeah. And he said to me, don't be surprised if something shows up in the next few days to remind you of this. I thought, yeah. So I went for a walk the following day, right, onto the fell near my house. I was sitting on this rock. It was a beautiful day, and I was just enjoying it. Then this sheep come up behind me. It made the weirdest noise I've ever heard. And it was really challenging. Not directly behind me. I looked at it. And it did it like 3 times and looked like that. And I thought, anyway, so that evening I was just at home and I thought, let's go on YouTube and see what a link sounds like. And I got home and put what the link sound like into YouTube, and I played it, and I kid you not, it was exactly the noise the sheep made. And I was like, that's pretty. it made me realise that like it's like everything appears in consciousness within us.
Yeah.
Did it sound like that?
Friggin' hell, city boy lynxes.
Yeah.
Why was he not Gillette? Yeah, this is it. It's like I loved it as you described that, Matt. You like, I almost got this sense of, forgive me if I'm paraphrasing, but it's almost like you lose sense of what you think is real compared to what we think is real. It's like I'm down this rabbit hole now. This looks very, very real, and it's like we start to lose a sense of, well, what is real. But I think that this is, these are beautiful examples of consciousness. It's like of what consciousness. We were just speaking just then, Mark, and about how you knew you were getting a phone call to tell you your father had passed away, and it's like you're saying it was weird, and it's like, the fact that we think that things like that are weird is weird. It's like reality, consciousness is a fucking phenomenal magic, and magic is magic. The thing is, we think it's something else. We think that reality is a linear thing. We think it's like a material world, and this material world is a predictable thing. But when we actually look at the material world, like we were just saying just then, Mark, when you really, what quantum physicists are saying now, if you really look at matter and you zoom and you zoom in and zoom in and you look and you realize there's nothing there. Everything, and what they say is everything is an infinite potential until it's observed, until it's measured as they describe it. And the moment measurement takes place with a sense, we get what is appearing as a physical world. Now, to our intellect, that makes no frigging sense, but to experiments that they've done in quantum physics, they're saying that consciousness is literally creating the idea of the physical world around ourselves. And this is the thing that pissed Einstein off. He said, I like to think that the moon exists when I'm not looking at it. But who the hell was it? I always forget this fellow's name. I should always remember it because Bohr. I think it was Bohr. He said, no, what I'm saying is the moon doesn't exist unless you're observing it. And it's like, to the world, to humanity that's walked around in a consciousness of, with the idea or the belief or ego of that there is this world outside of our consciousness. It's like, this is a fundamentally groundbreaking, the potential, if people could get a grasp of that en masse, it's like this world would change in such a way. But it's like, you can't get a grasp of it. And it's like, that's perfect. And I feel like the more we the more we start to get a sense of the mind and thought, the more you realize you don't control it. So much suffering is created in this world by people thinking that they control the thoughts that come into their mind, that they created them. As though somehow they've jumped forward in time to think something and bring it into manifestation now. But it's like, no, our mind thinks, our consciousness creates continuously. And this is why I always say to people, this isn't about anything what to do. This is simply about awareness. Become aware. Find that awareness. Find that life is awareness. But we'll get lost in a story. We'll get lost in stories and beliefs and assume that those realities are true and real, but they're a fact. But the only true fact in this universe cannot be grasped. It can't be measured. It can't be held. It can't be cut. It can't be weighed. It hasn't got a mass. It's like the true state of what everything truly is not something that we can intellectually get. And it's like, but it's what the essence of everything is. And I don't feel like I sometimes just look at this conversation and go, there is truly, the truest way you can talk about it is just say nothing. It's like, just don't speak, because it isn't anything.
When you're saying that, you're complicated, that not when you go right down to the far as you can, and it's just space, nothingness. And you just said then, don't speak. And like Sid always said, you know, you're looking for a quiet mind. And then it's in that nothingness, that's where we're all connected. That's where, I think Rumi says something like, in that peace and quietness, that nothingness, I'll meet you there. And that's where we all are. And that's that bit where, that's why when you do quiet your mind, all of a sudden, you do have that insight because you touch that space. And like you said, there's really no need to say anything if we could all just be a bar, right?
Yeah.
But it isn't it? It's just that space where there is nothing. That's where the magic happens.
Yeah.
Just thinking of that. I realised to say that nothing but what we think about it. In any given moment, people sort of say, "Oh, I wish it was different. I wish this wasn't happening. Oh, this is awful. This is that." I always say, "Like the moment is perfect. The moment is always totally perfect. And it's not perfect in the way that people think that it can. It has to be, yeah, simply because it's the real one." It's like James. It's like you can say, "Oh, I wish it was this. I wish it was that." And it's like, "Oh, there's this." And it's like, it is this. Therefore, anything else is resistance. No resistance is surrender, and surrender is nothing. You're back to nothing. You're back to the quiet mind.
Yeah, it's only an opinion, a judgment, or a point of view that suggests that it's either correct or incorrect. You know, whether it's right or wrong. It's like, and you know, it can be really quite challenging for people. I once did this conversation with this Orthodox Jewish lady who was speaking about Israel and Syria and all this stuff and terrorists, and I just came out with a fairly flippant remark because she was talking about terrorism. I said, look, I said, to me, that old saying of one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. That's kind of where I come from with that one. Like, separate reality. It's like no two people see the same world, you know. But to everybody, to all beings, their reality looks as though it's a fact, you know, and it looks real. And in that, it's like everybody gets lost in it, you know. And it's like this is where I feel like the more settled we become in that, it's like there's this just like an acceptance for just what is. It's like sometimes people are going to appear like dickheads to us, and sometimes places are going to appear like shit, and sometimes situations are going to appear terrible, and that's like, well, that's part of life. And I think one of the things that there's this talk by Alan Watts, and he says everybody lives in fear that somehow bad is going to overwin good. He said, and we undergo that this idea that somehow a bad thing is going to overtake good. He said, but the two are one. He said, no, you can't have a top without a bottom. You can't have a front without a back. I mean, you can create, look at all the dualities of life, light and dark, and heads and tails, and wet and dry. But you see, they both require each other to exist. You can't have darkness without light. You cannot have lightness without dark. You can't have life without death. You can't have something without nothing. You can't have nothing without something. So what is something? Well, it's everything we perceive. What is nothing? Well, the other face of it, what it came from. And it's like, when all these dualities kind of, you see all these dualities are ultimately the same thing. They're all one. It's like you realize nothing can overcome anything. Nothing can overcome anything. Good can't overcome bad, and bad can't overcome good. And it's like these are all perspectives of consciousness. These are all perspectives within the dream of life, our existence, our realities, our stories. And I remember this lady, she properly frigging lost her shit with me over that one. And it was like,
You got away with quite a lot.
yeah, I did get away with quite a lot, but it was like,
That one just tipped right in the edge.
yeah, but we just spoke about how, what? I said, look, I said, you're having a conversation with me now, I said, because you hate everything that you're experiencing. I said, so you're beating yourself up, you're destroying yourself, you're shouting at yourself, you're kicking the crap out of yourself. I said, you want to talk about war? And I just said to her, I said, when is it that peace takes place in a war? And she said, I said, can you bomb your way to peace? I said, can you fight or shoot your way to peace? She was like, I don't know. I said, I don't think you can. I said, peace only comes at a very specific time in war, and it's when everybody puts the weapons down and the fighting ceases. I said, it's not like you achieve peace. You can't manufacture peace. It's just what emerges as a natural byproduct of stopping fighting with one another. I said, but you're trying to fight your way to peace within your own mind. When you think something, you think that that thought is something to do with you. You identify with that thought. You think it's you. So you then go to war with the thought. I said, that's like going out into the ocean and trying to push down waves within the ocean, trying to flatten them out to stop them being wavy. Like, you're just creating more turbulence. You've gone to war with your own mind, and you cannot find peace by doing that. And this is where so much of psychology, ultimately, this is why people don't find freedom, because they're trying to suppress thought, when ultimately there's nothing to be afraid of in thought. What is there truly to be afraid of in a thought or a feeling, outside of a judgment that we have cast upon it or been told about? You know, there's no thought that is wrong. There's no such thing as a wrong thought. There's thought, full stop. You know, there's no such thing as wrong feelings. There's no such thing as a wrong experience. Everything is, whether we're experiencing heaven or hell, depression, sadness, anxiety, suicidal thought, whatever, death, or whether we're experiencing joy, peace, enlightenment, it doesn't matter. It's all the same thing. It's all an experience of consciousness. So it's like when you again, the dualities collapse. It's like it's all experience. That's what reality is. It's all an experience. Reality and experience are not separate. They're the same thing. So it's like what Sid brought to the world was, he brought a metaphor to try and explain this to people. The world exists as a state of consciousness. There's nothing to be afraid of, people. Fear exists as a thought. All experience is created via something that, the changing expressions of consciousness that people call thought. And that everything ultimately is the ultimate intelligence, the ultimate perfection.
I was just going to say as well, I think you then, if you question your own reality and you realise it's not true, and this can seem so far out, but it has so many practical implications in life. And when you were speaking earlier, one of the things that just occurred to me is there's been times where I start feeling like there's either an issue between us or I feel quite disconnected. And before I used to mull that over a lot and think, have I done something, or does this mean something? And still with this understanding, like my mind would still do that. But one of the things I've started to realise is I've actually got okay with having honest conversation and saying, oh, I'm feeling like this right now. Are you being awful to me, or is this in my imagination? Like, it's weird. You have these conversations because you get to see that your experience of another person is coloured by how you see. It's coloured, it's created. Your character for them is from you. And there's been times where I thought we've had like this most amazing connected few weeks, and then they were like, oh, I'm feeling totally lost, totally. I know I love you, but at the moment I just don't feel anything. I'm like, wow, like totally in my reality, we were all connected and we'd had this amazing time and it's been really fun. And I think you just get to see, like, it was described to me as that we're all wearing glasses that are covered in scratches, and every scratch is a belief, and that's what you look through. And all that seems to happen with this is you keep getting to either clean the glasses, try on different glasses, Like, you can't ever have a clear view, because that's the whole seeing your own absence thing again. But you start to get curious and open and honest and authentic. Like, to be able to, like, I realised yesterday, oh my God, I'm getting really caught up in a conversation back and forth, but what is my truth? What is honest? Well, my honest truth is I can't be asked with this. I actually quite like this person. Can I start again?
And that's in that moment.
And it's like you get to recreate and start again. Like, I always remember my niece when she was about 5 years old. Me and her had a bit of a. I was trying to get her to come and have tea, and she wanted to do something else, and I was getting really frustrated with her. My sister overheard, and she just came in and said, "Right, we're having a time out," and she separated us as if we were both kids. And after about 5 minutes, she came back out and she went, "Fresh start." I said, "What does that mean?" She goes, "Oh, we just start from now. We didn't need to talk about what happened." So it's almost like, I think sometimes we've said that it's so nice just to go big picture with this and recognise it's not in the content, it's not in the stories, it's in none of that. But on a day-to-day level, on a practical level, the more we recognise that, what comes to us in terms of how to live and how to have conversations and how to be with people is practical and it's honest, because we've become less afraid. Whereas I used to be so afraid to ask you certain questions in case I didn't like the answer, because it felt like someone else's answer could break me. Well, if we realise that we can't be broken, if we realise that we're complete and we're whole and we don't need anything outside, we do not need external validation to feel okay. Like, I know that as a teenager, I had quite a lot of good friends, I had boyfriends, my family used to give me loads of praise, teachers were kind to me, and I felt like shit. So you cannot give someone a feeling. You can't make someone feel bad, you can't make someone feel good. They cannot make you feel bad, they cannot make you feel good. Like, and the more that you see that, you realise we are not affected by anything other than our own consciousness. And I used to think, oh, but maybe I've made up that person doesn't like me. So I had to almost positive think it, or maybe they don't like me. And then what? But we don't have to put a positive spin on things. We don't have to try and make things look nice. It's like you get to see what is and realise it's perfect. There's nothing to break. The only thing being like knocked or nudged yesterday was my ego. And it crumbled in a moment.
Something you thought you had to defend.
And so I was, defending mine, defending someone else, and I was right, and I knew because I had been told, and all this story. And it's like the perfection in that. And this lady I was talking to wrote this beautiful poem about it, which I'll try and bring to next group, but it's about this, the hardest thing. And she said at the end of it, the hardest thing is remembering that we're born to forget. Like, we're born into duality, we're born into seeing self and other, we're born into this game. And I think the fact that we all get on as well as we do is amazing, given how differently we see the world. I think the fact that we can have conversations and use the clumsy tool of words, but still there's a recognition and a learning and an understanding or a change or a consciousness that happens is phenomenal. But like, we often talk about the value in just talking big, because I think I always used to, are people getting this? Are people understanding? Should I make it more practical? Is someone new? Are they not new? But you can't talk about it anyway. But I don't know what I heard, but I woke up. I can't remember the content of the course. And that's what so many people often say, like, I've been on this 3-day training, and if someone asked me what I'd actually been taught, I wouldn't remember. But there's this shift inside. There's a feeling of something different. There's a quality to it. And you get a feel for it. But I've loved that I'm getting more and more honest. More and more able to have honest conversation. More and more honest to say what I feel. Say what I think. Don't have to try and say the right thing so that someone else isn't upset. I can say what and I haven't become a horrible person, I don't think. But I've got to be more honest. This is what I actually think. This is what I actually feel. rather than I want to please people, I want people to like me. And you see it.
I think that one of the things that we often say is, it's like, I mean, when we're saying be honest, we have to understand honesty changes. What I honestly perceive in one moment is something that I might honestly perceive very differently within 10 minutes' time. Do you know what I mean? So we have to have a deep respect for the changing nature of reality.
Is that conversation?
Which one?
About marriage.
Oh, yeah, I mean, yeah. Totally, yeah. It's like in moments, yeah, you say stuff and then 10 minutes later you don't mean it, but you meant it in that moment. You honestly meant it, and then 10 minutes later you honestly don't. So yeah, there's this kind of respect for that, and there's also respect for that from other people. It's like people say things to us, and we go, oh, fucking hell, that must be what they really mean. Well, they really said that with some venom. They must mean that. Speak to them like a couple of days later. I'm sorry, I was in a fucking foul mood the other day.
Oh, they've forgotten even what they said.
Oh, they've forgotten what they've said, exactly, Mark. Yeah. And we carry this around as a belief, and we think that's what they still think. No. As much as our reality has changed, so do everybody else's. As much as our minds change, so do everybody else's. It's like, but there's this one thing we say to people. It's like, if you're honest with yourself, you're honest with the world, and the world knows what to do with honesty. It just fucking flows. You know, it's like people get on with life. It's like, but it's when people are honest with themselves, it's like, you know, it becomes, nobody knows where they stand. The world doesn't know where it stands. It's like, there's confusion, there's backstabbing, there's unspoken words, there's weasel words, there's all these things that go on. And I feel like this, like you say, the practical implications for being a human being is like, and getting to play in this game of life, because that's, you know, it truly is a game. It truly is a magical play of life. It's like, you cannot get it wrong. It's impossible to get it wrong. There is no wrong. There's no such thing as wrong. There's only in the grandest of scheme of things, there's only an idea of wrong to an idea as an idea of what is wrong. And you ask 10 people what's wrong, they'll give you a totally different response. Ask 10 people, go and watch the same film. Was it a good film or a bad film? You're going to get a very different response, because it's all in the eye of the beholder. So it's like reality is in the eye of the beholder, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. It's all these words that are already there. It's like, but they're so true. It's like, it really is it's just like, it's so, one of the listeners said the other day, and he said, I totally related to it. It was like, because I used to think that perhaps there's something special about me. It was like, I used to, before coming across the principles, I thought, perhaps there's something special about me. Perhaps there is. I didn't tell anybody that, but I'll tell everybody now. That's what I used to think. It was like, perhaps there's something special about me. And then when I got to wake up, I got to realise, there fucking is something special about me. I am awesome. But so is everybody else. So is everybody else. We're all the same. Everybody's equal. Everybody's totally the same. And it was such a humbling moment. And it was such a relief, because I was just normal. And like Sid said in that talk the other day, said, but in a world of people trying to be something other than normal, trying to be special, trying to be super, trying to be a somebody, he said, your normal stands out. He said, people notice that you're just normal. And it feels like that gift of normality is just what everybody's truly searching for.
That makes it special. Being normal, when you're really normal, then you're special, because you're different to everyone else. That's
what Sydney Banks was saying. He's saying when you become normal, it's like in a world of people trying to be something other.
One of the biggest insights I had was that just after grad school, I went back to work, and an I with boss, and I used to be just on my own in the car. So I had this place in there, what I thought was a big place in there, and I got in the car, and for 3 days I was thinking about it. It was just really winding me up. So just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and all I could do, all my day was just ruined by me thinking about what I was going to do to him. And then
I have days.
And then I think about 3 or 4 days later, I spoke to him, and he was like, no, how can you just be normal after what he said? I said, you bang out about it. Bang out about it. I said, don't argue with me. What arguing? What, we lost our temper. I didn't lose my temper. And that's when, and it just like, oh my God, he didn't even think, I thought he lost his temper. I'd lost mine, but he hadn't even lost his. And I just gone living that for 3 or 4 days in my head and think, and I'm on my own. I'm on my own, ruining my life, just driving around, listening to this, and it's all complete rubbish. And that was like, like a light bulb, you know. Honestly, it was like massive. It just changed everything for me.
Yeah. These little gifts you just get dropped in every now and again.
The way they think, how stupid was I?
Yeah. Well, you know, we all do it.
You say like going through the words. I don't know if I can vulgarize my age to defend myself either. But it's really funny when you're just saying that you realise that nobody can make you feel a certain way, and they can't make you feel a certain way. In a relationship, knowing that, I tried to tell them last night, it didn't go down well. so it's just really funny. But what was funny was that where I caught myself. It's not really about the argument. It's me catching you. We were actually out, so we were in a pub having something to eat. So it was really funny. But we're quite dynamic between us anyway over the years. We've been together many, many, many years. But it was just so funny because he has always been very, very stressed out. A few years ago, he found a way to deal with that. Now that was through like cheap paradox. But for him, it was very much about strategies to keep it down. I would just love him to see that there's nothing to keep down. But I can't. I'm not do that. But we were having this, and it got to the point with him sort of being, you're being so smug, you just think you've got a better thing than I have. Haven't you? 4 years ago, I got this sorted out, and now you think you've got it. And I'm going, no, I haven't, mine's much better than yours. And he just kept some amazing things to say about ego. And 2 weeks later, we were just laughing. It wasn't how we accepted each other. We were just going, hey, that was a good night. We'll carry on this conversation. But just to get, because the people, that's the time when making feel this catches me up. I want to get it. And so whenever I'm having a conversation with somebody, I'm close to one, I don't know what anybody else thinks about this. It's like the stakes that are not there otherwise I could just let because life happens, because it's stuff and I don't have to do anything. But then it catches me out in those moments.
Ram Dass said, if you think you're enlightened, go and spend a week with your family.
Yeah.
Watch that spider.
Coming through. It is going to come again, isn't it? No. It's just cracking through.
Oh, bless it. It's probably on a loud latch, isn't it?
Ah, yeah.
I'm moving here.
No, it's cute, isn't it?
Doesn't want you either. Bye.
It's going on your back, mate.
Right, come on.
It's a bit quick, isn't it?
You've lost your seat now.
I've lost my feet.
That's fine.
On your feet, lose your seat, dickhead.
He's laughing as well.
You think you're sitting there, you know?
Here we go.
My seat, get off.
It's really hot in here. Any questions online? No, any questions in the room? So stressful. It's like, I think it's such a beautiful thing when we realize stress isn't a thing. It's not an object, it's not a place, it's not a person. It's not created by a situation, it's not created by a place or a person, but it's created by a thought. But we'll always kind of try and find something to pin our feelings and emotions onto something. You did it. That did it. And I feel like this, when we wake up to this very simple, like cutting the tie between or we call it like cutting the umbilical, don't we, between outside and inside. When you sever that tie between an outside world and an inside world, and you sever that imaginary tie, because that's an imagination. The outside world is in imagination. It's like when we sever that tie, we realise there's nothing to fear. There's no wrong feelings. There's no feelings to fear. The only thing we're ever fearing is a thought that's going on in our mind, but we don't know that. We forget that. We forget that we're living in the experience of our mind. All the time, right now. This is consciousness creating. Can't escape it.
It's like your thought before a group, oh my God, we've got a choir next to us. That's going to be so distracting. How are we going to get on? Like this, so you're in the experience of it, and it's like, maybe they're not a choir or they were in a different room, but it's like, you see how easy it is.
Quiet. Because I went and asked him, I said, are you the choir? And they said, yeah. I said, I can't believe it. I said, when I read on the sign, I said, 11's choir. I said, that's terrible. He went, don't suppose you're a tenor, are you? And I'm thinking, probably more like a fiver. It won't pay me a tenor, mate.
Just gets back to you know nothing.
I was living in the experience of having fucking like some choral society next door, and it turns out no, it's not what's happening. But in the run up to this, it's like I was living in the dread of it. Oh God, what's it going to be like? And then you said something that completely put a whole new spin in it. That might be really nice having some singing. It might be really nice having some singing.
Sometimes there is music when they're doing tap and stuff at the other end.
Yeah.
They do different tempos and different types of music, and that's been in the background. And it's like a nice example. Like there has been times when you're totally distracted by the music, and that's all you can hear, and you miss the talk. Or has there been times when you've been listening to the talk and you're so into it, you actually completely miss that there's music. Like you can see with consciousness in the same way with meditation.
You just sat listening to talk and your mind's just wandering, so you're not even listening to the talk.
They often say in meditation, like anything can become part of your meditation. Like you think you need a quiet room, you think you need to be comfortable. And I think they're trying to get you to see that even your discomfort can be part of the meditation, even a noise, even something that seems distracting. Like you get present, it's just what is. And I think we often, when we've done retreats and things, we love to have beautiful venues and we do love all that stuff, and it's not that we won't do it, but we've got a friend who teaches this in the jail system. She goes, there might be a lockdown and there might be this and there may have been a fight. So it's not the environment, it's not the situation, it's not the circumstance. If someone's going to wake up and hear, they'll hear this, despite the rest of the noise, despite the bars or whatever it is. And I think you see how quick we are to go, oh, we need a nice quiet space for a retreat so it can be this. And you forget that it could be on a busy tube when you're having a chat with someone. You've met a stranger and suddenly they hear something. Like it is that ordinary, and there is no kind of situation or circumstance or things in place for this to happen, because it's already here, it's already there. And I think it's a really good thing to remember, because I used to get really worried, like if I was doing an event and there was noise next door, it would really worry me. I'd worry about the people in the room, I'd worry about being professional, but it's just what it is. And it doesn't mean that sometimes we might say, can we please not be next door to that amateur dramatics group? You might not want them next door to us, but you just see that even that was perfect, because you were like, I was livid inside, and I was like, really? You did such a good job of hiding it. I thought you were fine.
I was livid. I was having thoughts of putting people up against the wall and all kinds of things.
Well, the thing is, there's nothing this isn't.
Yeah.
There's nothing this isn't. So I think then that's the perfection. You can talk about it in any way. That's why there isn't a way to share. There isn't a teaching. There isn't a something. Because there's nothing that it's not. Then it takes it away from needing to get someone or taking someone else to see something. There's nothing that this isn't, and the knowledge is already there.
That was a nice ending. I like that. That was a nice ending. No questions. Can't express how beautiful and insightful Dave is. Tonight was really explained with such grace and
You egotistic bastard.
I'm just dyslexic, look. Thank you again. Would like to ask one thing only. When Jenny realised with her friend, this is silly, did the friend respond with the same? And what if they don't still remain in their own tension, etc.? Oh, you read that because I'm shit.
As I understand, it's great for our well-being, but how about when it doesn't reciprocate for the benefit of the relationship? I hope that makes sense. This particular person was like, yeah, let's start again. And there's been other people actually that have chosen to not be in my life anymore, and I can still love them, even if they choose not to be. And I think it can look like us having that realization that our well-being is going to be dependent on them seeing something, or our relationship continuing. Like a relationship is within us anyway. There's people who actually, through no fault of mine, just because I'm a relation of someone, have cut me out of their life, and I still got so much love for them, and I still have a relationship with them in a weird way because I still experience them. But I don't think you don't need anyone else to see this for you to find your own peace with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Thank you.
But it's interesting. No, we'll say that as well. It's like we'll say, yeah, I get it's all right for my well-being, but the relationship. What about the relationship? It's like we can make that another thing, and it's like at the end of the day, people are going to think and experience whatever they're thinking and experiencing. But I think it's such a beautiful thing. I find myself, the other day, I was in such a bad mood with somebody. I'm trying to bring it to mind. What the heck was it? Yeah. And then I got to get some more knowledge about this individual, and this. It was like they can think whatever they wish about me. They truly can. They can think anything about me. In fact, I've got no idea what anybody thinks about me. I've got no idea. But it really doesn't matter. It's like it doesn't matter. It's like when you see it's all a game. It's all a game. When you see reality, we take it. This is one of humanity's biggest problems. It takes life so seriously when it isn't a serious thing. It's a play of consciousness. And so within this play of consciousness, we're going to have people who don't like us. Within this play of consciousness, we're going to have people who don't like us. We're going to have people who fall in love with us. We're going to have people who fall out of love with us. This is all part of the massive, dynamic, infinite potential we call reality, where anything's possible. And it's like, I think just when we take the personal out of it, there's nobody there to be hurt. There's nothing to hurt. So what ultimately are we defending when we're trying to keep a relationship together? We're trying to defend a memory of things that have happened in the past, how things once were. But the truest nature of matter or substance or creation is that it is in constant change. And we cannot expect life to always be the same. It's going to have its ups and downs. It has to. Yeah, that's right, love. We're just defending. We're defending, and we're resisting what's happening.
Get down to nitty-gritty though. Think about it. We're all one. So all you're doing is falling out with someone. You're only falling out with yourself. But basically, at the end of the day, whatever happens when we go to wherever we just go back wherever we all are, and we're all just going back to one. So when you think that it really is a game, we're just silly, we're all falling out with each other.
It's all a game.
Ourselves. We're falling out. I'm falling out with you, or you, and you're me. And we're just all one thing.
Absolutely.
If that's the case, then nobody's really falling out with each other. Do you just mean back to who you are?
Even if you think, that doesn't really matter. The end product is just go back to the same thing. We've been here all together now, and we've been here before. We're just the same being, really. If you went out, if you zoomed out of the earth, it would just be a little thing like that, and that we're all together on this earth. It would just be like a seed, like little seed. And like when you zoom into a seed, that's just, it's just the same thing, isn't it? You can see, go into a seed, and that's all the little pods and all the little people. And if you zoomed out to us and saw us, that's the same. Someone else bigger could look at that and think, oh, look at them little people. Oh, it's just perspective, isn't it? Yeah, a bit deep there.
No, I thought you were selling a giant. I'll tell you a giant to us leave it.
I love it. Thanks. Thanks, did we?
Yeah, you did, mate. Yeah, you did.
Cool.
Perfect. Yeah, lovely. Thank you.
Oh, loads of love.
Yeah, Chris just texted me from Saudi saying say hi to you.
Oh, send him our love, will you?
Yeah, he's back the weekend. They'll probably have a catch up day when he's home, he said.
Cool.
Great.
That'll be nice. That'll be nice. Right, we'll call it a night. Thank you, everybody. Keep noise down.